There's great concern today about the number of young people who are, quote, off the derech, which generally refers to that they leave the family's traditional observance. Now, off the derech can mean different things for different families who have different standards of observing Yiddishkeit. And there are several books that have been written about the subject, and they are worth reading. For youngsters who go off the derech, there may be a variety of reasons, and there may be an interplay of a number of them. It is not always possible to attribute it to one single factor. Sometimes I must wonder that maybe the question we're asking is the wrong one. Rather than asking, why are some youngsters going off the derech, maybe the question is, what is keeping other youngsters on the derech? You know, we are living in a very, very difficult time. Our society today is probably the most hedonistic, pleasure-seeking society since man was created. Technology has given us so many wonderful things and has eliminated so many sources of distress that people seem to have the idea that the world is intended to be pleasurable and that the goal of life is to fulfill as much pleasure, get as much pleasure as you can get. And there are many, many sources of pleasure at anyone's fingertips. So I guess one of the questions that we should ask is, since it's a natural instinct to go for pleasure, what is keeping so many youngsters within the framework of Yiddishkeit that is restricting so many pleasures that are out there? Maybe we ought to look at that. And perhaps the prime reason is that they don't want to lose the precious contact with the family, which means that a wholesome family relationship is probably the single greatest factor that is going to keep youngsters on the derech. And that a rupture in the family relationship or unpleasant family relationships may be the single greatest factor that causes kids to go off the derech. And I have said so many times that the most important thing that parents can give their children is a true shalom bayis. But I emphasize the word true shalom bayis. Not a shalom bayis that looks good on the outside, but is filled with conflict on the inside. True shalom bayis means where both parents are sensitive and considerate to each other and are willing to sacrifice their own desires and their own comforts for the benefit of the other. And the next step it is that once parents bring a child into the world, I say that they have forfeited the right to insist on their own desires and wants. And at that point, their purpose and good and goal should be what is best for the child who we have brought into the world. And they should be ready to set their own wants and needs aside in favor of the ultimate good for the child. Now, that does not mean that the child should be spoiled and pampered. No way. Because that is not for the ultimate good for the child. But that the parents should take a very hard look as to whether what they are doing is really for the child's ultimate good or for their own. A number of years ago, there was a study done interviewing families who had children with problems and interviewing families who seemed to be free of children with problems. And a lot of information was taken from these families and from these families. Hundreds of families were interviewed. And all the data was put into a computer to see if it could identify any single factor that was outstanding in the healthier families than in the families that had problems with their children. Surprising, and maybe should have not have been so surprising, was that families that were healthier had meals with the children together more often. The parents and the children shared meals more often. That doesn't always happen. In many families, one child comes in at 5:30, the other comes in at 6:15, or the parents may eat later at night. There's something about eating meals together and making it a pleasant occasion that is important to the child. But whether it's that or other techniques, the major thing in keeping a child on the derech is to make the home a pleasant place, because people do not leave pleasant situations. If a child breaks away from the family, it is probably because the family did not give him the security and the love and the well-being that he craved. So we have to be very careful with shalom bayis and providing a very healthy and pleasant environment for children in the family. Now, of course, there are individual kinds of things that children may have problems that are beyond the family to do anything about. There are mental problems and physical problems. And there are so many of those that we can't even begin to discuss those. But we're talking about where there are children that are basically healthy physically and mentally, and why then do they leave? Children will stay on the derech if they respect the family's values. And if parents will observe the rituals of Torah, but their midos will be lacking, they're giving the children a wrong message about Yiddishkeit. And so, for example, if a father is very observant in everything he does, but he loses his temper. Right? Losing one's temper is a very grievous sin. The Talmud compares it with idolatry, with avodah zarah. And one cannot claim to be observant of Torah if one loses one's temper, any more than one can be observant of Torah if one eats treifa. And there are other important midos. Truth, honesty, consideration of others. These are the midos of Yiddishkeit. And if a child sees that the parents are ritually observant, but that they are dishonest, or that they speak lashon hara, they lose respect for the families, for the parents' values, and then they may go off the derech. We also have problems in our chinuch system. Children want to feel that they are excelling in their studies, or at least keeping up with their peers. And unfortunately, the system in many schools and many yeshivas is that, whether it's the size of the classroom or whatever, that there are some children who cannot keep pace with the rest of the class. And they fall behind, and they feel the uh, odd man out. Now, peer pressure can be very strong. And if the youngster does not feel himself or herself as part of the group that is succeeding in their studies, they may find a peer group outside of the school, outside of the yeshiva, that is welcoming them. And it's very often this peer group that uses drugs and engages in other unacceptable behaviors. So that parents have to be very careful in knowing how their children are doing in school, if there are problems, why there are problems, trying to do their utmost with the help of the school staff to correct those problems. And the child should know that everything is being done to help him or her. And if the child happens to be limited intellectually in the sense that they cannot keep up with the group, then the parents ought to find what is appropriate for their child. It's important for parents to know what are the child's interests and what can legitimately be done to satisfy the child's interests. Chinuch is not a one-size-fits-all. And it's going to take much effort from parents and educators to meet the needs of the child. These are just some of the factors that can cause a child to go off the derech. But I think if we stress them and provide a wholesome, pleasant, secure home, that we've made a great stride in keeping the child on the derech. If the child feels that the parents are putting his or her interests first, that keeps the child on the derech. If the child feels that everything is being done to help them succeed in learning, and that if they're having difficulty in learning, and that maybe they are not suited to be an intellectual genius, that they still have a feeling of worthiness, and that the parents love them and care for them and are proud of them for what attempts they are making, rather than the results. The child may not be able to produce results, but has to be approved and complimented for efforts that they are making. I think these are some of the highlights of the off the derech problem. But I recommend that you look at the books that describe off the derech, because the authors have interviewed many families and many youngsters, and you may find some very helpful information as to what can be done about the off the derech problem.